I never thought surviving cancer would be the easier battle compared to what came next. After months of chemo, endless hospital visits, and nights where I clung to hope like it was the last breath in my lungs, I thought life would slow down. I thought I'd get peace. But instead I found myself staring down a different kind of fight, one I never signed up for. This time, it wasn't with my body. It was with my own neighbors and a homeowners association board drunk on power. I live in Oregon, right by the riverside cabins. Our community has this rustic charm, wooded lots, kids riding bikes, canoes tied up along the shore. After the hurricane ripped through last year, we rebuilt together, helping each other put roofs back on, cutting fallen trees and sharing generators. You'd think that kind of hardship would make people bond tighter, right? But it also made the HOA tighten their grip, and that's where this all starts. See, I own a small RV, nothing flashy. Just a modest trailer I use when my kids and I go fishing downriver or when family visits. After cancer, I promised myself I'd make memories with them, simple ones, toasting marshmallows, stargazing, hearing them laugh without me worrying. About hospital bills, the RV was part of that dream, but apparently to the HOA it was an eyesore, a threat to their community image, and the person leading that charge was Karen. You know the type. Always strutting around with a clipboard, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, acting like she owns the whole street. She didn't. Just enforce rules. She invented them, and God help you if you didn't follow. It started small. Notes on my door. RV must be removed immediately. Then emails filled with threats of fines. I tried to reason with them, explaining that post-hurricane, many of us were using RVs and trailers just to get by. Some families still had roofs covered in tarps, but to Karen, none of that mattered. To her, my RV was a stain on her precious little kingdom. The real breaking point? The day she yelled at my kids. It was a Saturday morning. I was setting up a little grill near the cabin, and my kids, 8 and 10, were playing tag near the community park. That park was one of the few places left where the grass wasn't destroyed by floodwaters, where laughter still echoed. I could hear them giggling, their voices bouncing like music, and then the sharp, shrill sound of Karen's voice cut through the air. "Do you brats not see the sign?" she screeched. I froze, spatula in hand. By the time I rounded the corner, there she was, hands on hips, face twisted in anger. My son was clutching his sister's hand, both wide-eyed and silent. Karen jabbed a finger toward the RV parked a few feet from the edge of the park. "This is against regulations, and don't think you can just run wild in here like animals. Rules exist for a reason." I'll never forget the look on my daughter's face, the way her little chin trembled. Trying not to cry in front of this woman, something in me snapped. After everything I'd survived, after nights of praying I'd live long enough to see my kids grow, I was not about to let some HOA Karen break their spirit. I marched over. My voice was steady, but my blood was boiling. "Karen, you don't ever raise your voice at my kids again," she scoffed. Maybe if their father respected the HOA rules, they wouldn't be causing problems. That was it. That was the moment the fight went from an annoyance to a mission. At first, I tried the polite route. I attended the next HOA meeting, sitting in the stiff folding chairs, while Karen and her board droned on about property values and uniform aesthetics. When it was my turn, I explained again why I needed the RV, how it wasn't harming anyone, how half the neighborhood was still recovering from storm damage. I could see neighbors nodding along. For a second, I thought reason would win. But Karen leaned forward, smirking like she'd already won. "Rules are rules," she said. "If we let one trailer stay, what's next? Junkyards in front yards." Her little minions on the board nodded in unison. And that was when I realized she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was building her own empire of control, and she expected us to bow. I walked out of that meeting with a decision. If Karen wanted a war, she picked the wrong neighbor. The first twist came sooner than I expected. A week later, I got a letter, certified mail no less, stating that the HOA was fining me $200 per week until I removed the RV. That's when the pit formed in my stomach. I couldn't afford endless fines. Medical debt still clung to me like a shadow, but instead of fear, I felt something else: determination. You see, cancer taught me how to fight, how to endure, how to outlast the odds, and I wasn't about to let an HOA bully steal the small joys I had fought so hard to earn. So I started documenting everything. Every note, every email, every hostile comment Karen made. I spoke to neighbors quietly, and many whispered back stories of their own. Karen had harassed one family about their fence color, another about hanging laundry out to dry, someone else about leaving a kayak too close to the riverbank. Everyone had a Karen story, but nobody wanted to speak up until they saw what she did to my kids. That was the line. And slowly people started coming to me, sharing screenshots, forwarding emails, offering witness statements. Karen thought she had isolated me. What she didn't realize was that she had united the whole neighborhood against her. The best part? I found out that Oregon had just tightened state oversight on HOAs after multiple complaints following the hurricane. The state had launched probes into HOA abuse of power. If I could gather enough evidence, I could turn the spotlight directly onto Karen's little empire. But I'll be honest, friends, standing in my kitchen late at night, reviewing all those files, I felt the same nerves I did sitting in a hospital. Bed waiting for test results. The stakes were high, and the enemy was relentless. Still, I looked out the window at my RV parked beneath the pine trees, at my kids sleeping safe in their beds, and I whispered to myself, "You survived worse. You can survive this." And little did I know, the way this story would end would not just free me, but it would change everything for our neighborhood. Karen had no idea the storm she had unleashed. Have you ever had someone in power use rules just to control, not to help? How did you handle it? If you were in my shoes, facing fines and harassment over something as small as an RV, would you fight back or give in? CTA. If this story made your blood boil, smash that like button right now. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because you won't want to miss the next twist in this wild homeowners association drama. The morning after Karen screamed at my kids, I woke up to find another neon yellow notice taped to my door. Bold black letters shouted across the page, "Final warning, RV must be removed within 7 days or further legal action will be taken." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so over the top it felt like a scene out of a bad sitcom. 7 days, legal action, over a family RV that had been parked there for years without issue. But that's the thing about power trips. When people like Karen smell blood, they go all in. Instead of panicking, I brewed myself a strong cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out a thick binder. Not a new one. This binder had been my lifeline during cancer treatment. Every test result, every bill, every insurance fight, all neatly logged. I knew paperwork could be the difference between winning and losing. This time, I was going to build a new binder, the Karen binder. Inside went the HOA letters, every email printout, and a growing list of testimonies from neighbors. The first real breakthrough came that afternoon. My neighbor, Mark, a quiet man who lived 3 cabins down, knocked on my door. He had a folder under his arm. "Hey," he said in a low voice, glancing over his shoulder, "I heard about what happened with your kids. You're not the first." He opened the folder and handed me a stack of papers. HOA violation notices, fines, summers. Ridiculous as charging him $50 because his canoe was improperly stored. "She's been running this place like her own personal fiefdom," he said. "But the thing is, she isn't even following state statutes. HOAs here have to give proper hearing notices before fines, and she never does." That was the first In time I realized Karen wasn't just cruel, she was sloppy. I started digging deeper. Oregon's laws around HOAs were stricter after the hurricane, especially when it came to harassment and selective enforcement. If Karen was targeting certain families but ignoring others, that was gold in my case. And oh, did I find gold. One evening, scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group, I stumbled on a post from a resident who had painted his cabin door bright blue after the storm. Karen's HOA had forced him to repaint it neutral beige. The kicker? A month later, Karen painted her own front door fire engine red. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Screenshots went straight into the binder. Still, Karen didn't back off. She doubled down. 3 days later, I was sitting by the river with my kids, when a white SUV rolled up. Out stepped Karen, clipboard in hand. She didn't even greet me, just clicked her pen like she was about to write a ticket. "You've ignored repeated notices," she barked. "You have 4 days left before we escalate." I looked her dead in the eye. "Escalate to what, Karen? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like harassment." Her face flushed red. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you can turn this community against me? I built this place. Without me, property values would tank." I smiled just a little. "Funny, Karen, because from what I've seen, you've done more damage to this community than the hurricane." That shut her up for a split second. She stomped back to her SUV and peeled out, gravel spraying. But I noticed something important in that exchange. Karen was rattled. She wasn't used to someone pushing back. That night, I started reaching out. One by one, I visited neighbors who had their own Karen stories. An elderly widow who got fined for hanging a wind chime. A single dad fined for leaving bikes on the porch. A retired veteran fined for putting up an American flag. Every story added fuel to the fire. And when I promised them confidentiality, they opened up even more. The real twist, though, came from an unexpected ally. At the next HOA meeting, I sat in the back row, binder in hand. Karen ran the meeting as usual, rambling about landscaping, rules and budget adjustments. But midway through, one of her own board members, Janet, a middle-aged mom who'd always seemed nervous, spoke up. "Karen," Janet said, voice shaky but firm, "I think we need to address the complaints." "People feel targeted," Karen snapped. "Complaints are just noise. We run things by the book." That's when I stood up, slowly, calmly, and I said, "Funny you should mention by the book, because I've got the book right here." Every eye in that room turned toward me. I opened the binder and flipped through the pages, holding up examples of selective enforcement. Screenshots of her door, red as a fire truck, notices that skipped legal requirements, letters dripping with hostility. The room buzzed, people whispered, some gasped. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. "You have no authority to bring this up," she screeched. "Neither do you," I shot back, "when you're ignoring state law. Oregon statutes say every homeowner has the right to fair treatment and proper notice. What you've been doing isn't just unfair, it's illegal." The silence that followed was thick. That was my first retention peak. The moment where viewers can almost see Karen's mask crack. Of course, she tried to regain control. Slamming her gavel, she declared the meeting adjourned and stormed out. But the damage was done. For the first time, people saw her for what she was, not a protector of property values, but a tyrant hiding behind rules. Walking home that night, my kids skipping beside me, I felt lighter. Not victorious yet, but like the tide had shifted. I knew Karen wouldn't go quietly. She'd push harder, but so would I. And now I wasn't alone. The next step? Taking the binder beyond the neighborhood, straight into the hands of the state. HOA Oversight Committee, and trust me, you'll want to stick around because when the state stepped in, Karen's empire started to crumble in ways even I didn't predict. Do you think neighbors should have stood up to Karen earlier? Or did it take someone being pushed too far to spark change? If you were Janet, the board member who broke ranks? Would you have spoken up or stayed silent to avoid Karen's wrath? CTA. If you enjoyed seeing Karen's mask finally crack, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss the next where the state gets involved and Karen's control starts to unravel. The morning after that explosive HOA meeting, my phone buzzed with text after text. Thank you for speaking up. You were brave. Last night, count me in if you need statements. It was like the neighborhood had been holding its breath for months, maybe years, and finally, someone had cracked the seal. The relief in their messages was palpable, but along with it came fear, because everyone knew Karen wouldn't just roll over. She'd come back swinging, and boy, did she. 2 days later, I came home to find not one but 3 envelopes waiting in my mailbox, each stamped with the HOA's letterhead. One was a $500 fine for obstructing the view of the river with my RV. The second claimed I owed legal fees for disrupting board proceedings. The third, a threat to place a lien on my property if I didn't comply. That pit in. My stomach returned. A lien meant real consequences, credit damage, even the risk of losing my home. For a second, doubt gnawed at me. Should I just cave, move the RV and cut my losses? But then I thought of my kids, the way they'd huddled together when Karen yelled at them, the way my daughter whispered to me that night, "Daddy, why does she hate us?" No, I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Instead, I pulled out the binder and dialed a number I'd been holding on to, the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services, the division responsible for HOA oversight. I explained the situation, the fines, the harassment, the selective enforcement. The woman on the line listened carefully, then said words that made my pulse race. "We've received other complaints about your HOA. You're not the first. If you're willing to submit documentation, we can open a formal investigation." My binder was about to become Exhibit A. Over the next week, I worked like a man possessed. After years of battling cancer, my body still carried scars, but my willpower, sharper than ever. I scanned documents late into the night, highlighted statutes, organized neighbor testimonies into neat folders. Mark, the quiet neighbor, helped me cross-check Oregon HOA statutes, and Janet, the board member who had dared speak up, secretly slipped me copies of internal emails Karen had sent. Those emails were damning. In one, she referred to me as the troublemaker. In another, she wrote, "We must make an example of him before others get bold." She wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was running a dictatorship. Meanwhile, Karen ramped up her campaign. She patrolled the neighborhood like a hawk, snapping pictures of lawns, fences, even children's toys left outside. She issued fines left and right. But here's the twist. The more she cracked down, the more people joined my side. One evening at dusk, I found a note tucked under my door. No name, just a shaky handwritten message. "I've been too scared to speak out. But after what you did at the meeting, I want to help. Attached are copies of fines we received for things Karen herself does. Please use them." Enclosed were copies of fines for improper holiday decorations, while Karen had strung up lights that didn't meet code. Photos of her dog off-leash, while others were fined for the same. My binder grew thicker. When I finally submitted everything to the state probe, I half expected silence. But within days, I received an official letter confirming that an investigation had been launched into our HOA board. And here's where the first massive backfire hit. Karen must have caught wind of the investigation, because the very next HOA meeting was unlike anything I'd ever seen. She walked in late, slamming her papers on the table, her face blotchy red. "We have been unfairly targeted," she barked. "Someone in this community is feeding lies to the state." Her eyes scanned the room like a predator hunting prey, and for a moment her gaze locked on me. But here's the kicker. Before she could launch into one of her tirades, neighbors started speaking up. One by one, I've been fined for ridiculous things too. You told me I couldn't hang laundry, but your own line is out back. You threatened to tow my kayak, Karen. The room erupted. People who had once been silent out of fear now found their voices. It was like a dam breaking. Karen pounded her gavel, shrieking, "Order, order!" But the noise drowned her out. And the best part, Janet, usually timid, stood up and said, "Karen, maybe the state needs to look into us. Maybe we haven't been fair." That moment was priceless. Karen's own board member openly questioning her in front of everyone. She tried to cut the meeting short again, but this time nobody left. People lingered, whispering, exchanging contact info, forming a quiet alliance. And when Karen stormed out, I swear, I saw her hand trembling, the first real crack in her empire. The very next day, a state investigator showed up in the neighborhood. Clipboard in hand, badge clipped to his shirt, he went door to door, interviewing residents, collecting documents. And Karen, she was fuming. She marched right up to him in the middle of the street, demanding he leave. "This is private property," she shrieked. The investigator calmly replied, "Ma'am, by law, you are required to cooperate." I wish you could have seen her face. That, right there, was our first fantasy win. Watching Karen realize she wasn't above the law, but even with the state breathing down her neck, she wasn't done yet. That's what made her dangerous. A cornered animal fights hardest. And deep down, I knew the worst clash was still to come. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat by the river, binder on my lap, thinking. Cancer had taught me patience. It had taught me to endure pain for the sake of something better. And as I listened to the river rushing by, I knew we were on the cusp of something big. Karen wanted me gone. She wanted control. But what she didn't understand was that she had already lost it. The neighborhood no longer feared her. They saw her for who she was, and now the state was watching. The storm was building, and this time Karen wouldn't be able to shout her way out of it. If you were in my shoes, facing liens and escalating fines, would you risk everything by going to the state, or just move the RV to avoid trouble? Do you think Karen's board members should be held accountable too, or was she the only real villain here? CTA. If you loved seeing Karen finally face state investigators, smash that like button now. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next, where Karen makes her boldest, most desperate move yet, and you won't believe the outcome. When the state probe officially began, I thought Karen might finally cool down. Maybe she'd lie low, let the investigators do their job, and hope the storm passed. But if you know anything about HOA Karens, you know that's not how they work. When their power starts slipping, they don't step back. They double down, and Karen doubled down hard. It started with a knock on my door, a man in a suit holding a stack of papers thick enough to be a phone book. "You've been served," he said flatly. I stood there stunned, the weight of the papers heavy in my hands. Inside, a lawsuit. Karen, acting on behalf of the HOA, was suing me personally for defamation of character, disruption of community order, and refusal to comply with HOA regulations. I let out a low whistle. She wasn't playing small anymore. She was throwing the kitchen sink at me. The papers were filled with exaggerated claims. That I'd incited hostility, that I'd led a smear campaign, that my RV posed safety hazards, lies stacked on lies. For a moment, I felt my knees go weak. I'd just clawed my way back from debt after cancer treatments. The thought of legal bills piled on top of that. It was suffocating, but then I remembered something. Karen wasn't the HOA. She was just one person, and she was reckless. Filing a lawsuit in the HOA's name without proper board approval? That was a violation all by itself. I called Janet, the board member, who had quietly been slipping me emails. Her voice on the line was trembling but steady. "She didn't get a vote," Janet said. "The board never approved a lawsuit. She did this on her own." That was it. That was the first domino. The next HOA meeting was electric. Word had spread about the lawsuit. People crammed into the community hall, whispering and shaking their heads. Karen strutted in, papers in hand, acting like she was about to deliver a State of the Union. She banged the gavel and declared, "We are moving forward with legal action against repeat violators to preserve our community standards." But this time, people didn't sit quietly. Janet stood up. "Karen, you didn't consult us. You never brought this to a vote." Mark, the quiet neighbor, chimed in too. "You don't speak for all of us. You're using the HOA as your personal weapon." The murmurs turned into a buzz. For once, the room wasn't scared of her gavel. Karen's face twisted. "If we don't enforce rules, this place falls apart," she snapped. I couldn't resist. I raised my hand, binder at the ready. "You mean like how you enforce rules? You for everyone else, but not yourself? Should I show the state investigators those pictures of your red door again?" The room erupted in laughter. Actual laughter. The kind that cuts straight through a tyrant's armor. Her cheeks flushed scarlet. She slammed the gavel so hard it cracked the wood. But the damage was done. The lawsuit she thought would intimidate me, it had backfired spectacularly. Not only had it exposed her overreach, but it gave the state investigators another golden nugget: misuse of HOA funds and authority. The investigator showed up again that week, this time sitting in on the board meeting unannounced. Clipboard out, pen scratching every detail. Karen tried to puff up her chest and act official, but when he asked, "Did the board vote on this lawsuit?" the silence was deafening. Janet cleared her throat. "No, Karen acted alone." Boom! Just like that, the lawsuit lost its teeth. Without board approval, it wasn't valid. Worse, it put Karen under direct suspicion for abusing her position. Watching her squirm in that moment was better than any movie. Her jaw clenched, her hands shook, and for once her voice faltered. This is a misunderstanding." The investigator didn't even look up. "Ma'am, this will be noted in the report." That was our ironic backfire. Karen had tried to crush me with a lawsuit. Instead, she'd given the state the perfect ammunition to dismantle her authority. But here's where the story took an even wilder twist. Because Karen wasn't just reckless, she was vengeful. If she couldn't beat me through fines or lawsuits, she'd go after my reputation. The very next week, a flyer appeared in every mailbox. A poorly written, all-caps rant titled, "The Truth About Your Neighbor." It accused me of endangering children by leaving my RV unstable. It claimed I was sowing division and ruining property values. It even hinted that I was using my illness for sympathy. I stood on my porch, holding that flyer, my hands trembling, not from fear but from rage. Surviving cancer wasn't a weakness, it was my victory. For her to weaponize it? That was low, even for Karen, but once again her plan backfired. Instead of turning neighbors against me, it rallied them even closer. Within hours, people were knocking on my door. Mark showed up first, waving his copy of the flyer. "This is garbage," he said. "We know who you are. We've seen what you've done for this neighborhood." Then came the elderly widow Karen had fined over a wind chime. "She's desperate," she whispered. "Don't let her break you." By nightfall, I had 20 neighbors packed in my living room, flyers crumpled in their hands, all saying the same thing. "We're with you." That was the moment I realized Karen's reign was collapsing. Not because of me alone, but because she had finally pushed the entire community too far. The state investigator returned a week later, not just with a clipboard this time, but with an assistant. They sat at Karen's dining room table for nearly 3 hours, while neighbors lined up to give statements. One after another, people shared their stories, their fines, their frustrations. And I'll never forget the look on Karen's face as she sat trapped at her own table, forced to listen, her power slipping with every word. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was united, not under fear but under hope. Of course, Karen wasn't done yet, not entirely. Like any villain in a good story, she had one last desperate card to play, but by then the tide was already against her, and when her final stunt came, it wouldn't just end her HOA empire, it would get her banned from the very park she once used to scream at my kids. If someone spread lies about you to your whole neighborhood, would you fight back directly or let your reputation speak for itself? Do you think the neighbors should have confronted Karen sooner instead of waiting until she pushed too far? CTA. If watching Karen's lawsuit backfire gave you satisfaction, hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next is the turning point, where Karen's desperate stunt finally costs her everything. The neighborhood felt different after the investigator's second visit. Lighter somehow, like we were finally exhaling after years of holding our breath. Kids played in the park without constant scolding. Neighbors waved to each other in solidarity. For once, people weren't whispering behind closed doors. They were speaking openly, knowing they weren't alone. But Karen, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Her lawsuit had collapsed. Her flyers had flopped. And now she was a woman backed into a corner. Anyone who's ever dealt with a Karen knows that's when they're most dangerous. The first sign came late one Friday night. My phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen had posted a long, rambling message accusing me of coordinating a coup against the HOA. She called me a criminal, a threat to safety, and even claimed the state investigator was my friend from the city who I had manipulated with fake evidence. It was wild, absolutely unhinged. I sat on the couch reading it, shaking my head. But then the comments started rolling in. Karen, this is uncalled for. Maybe if you treated people fairly, you wouldn't be under investigation. Stop embarrassing the neighborhood. One by one, people defended me. For the first time, Karen was the one being cornered publicly, and the more she typed, all caps, exclamation points, paragraphs of nonsense, the worse she looked. By morning, her post had over 200 comments, most of them siding against her. By afternoon, it was deleted. Another backfire. But Karen wasn't just raging online. She was working behind the scenes too. That week, I noticed a strange car parked near my cabin. Different times, different days, always idling, always with someone inside. At first I thought it was paranoia, but then Mark called me. She's hired some security guy, he whispered. Says she needs to monitor the neighborhood for rule breakers. I looked out my window at the RV parked by the pines and shook my head. She wasn't just trying to find me anymore. She was trying to intimidate me. So I did what I'd learned to do best. Document it. Photos, timestamps, even short videos of the car lurking. Into the binder it went. Then came the biggest twist yet. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. This time not from Karen or the HOA, but from the State Oversight Committee. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, bold black letters spelled out what I'd been praying for: preliminary findings. The HOA Board of Community Name has engaged in selective enforcement, improper fines, and potential misuse of funds. Immediate corrective. Actions required. I nearly fell into a chair. It wasn't the final ruling yet, but it was the first official recognition that Karen's reign wasn't just unpleasant, it was unlawful. I read the letter 3 times over, just to let it sink in. The state was on our side. That evening, I called a meeting, not an HOA meeting, but a neighborhood gathering at the Riverside Park. Word spread fast. By sunset, nearly 50 people were there, sitting on folding chairs, picnic blankets, even tree stumps. Kids chased fireflies nearby while parents leaned in to listen. I stood there, letter in hand, heart pounding. "Friends," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "We're not powerless. The state has spoken, Karen's abuse of power is being investigated and corrective action is coming. Cheers erupted, actual cheers echoing against the river. People clapped, some even whistled. The energy was electric. After months of fear, we had hope, and not just hope. Proof, but not everyone was smiling. Off to the side, arms crossed tight, Karen stood glowering. She hadn't been invited, but of course she showed up. Her sunglasses couldn't hide the fury in her eyes. "You're all fools," she spat, stepping forward. "This man is manipulating you. He wants to destroy our community." Mark shouted back, "No, Karen, you did that yourself." Others joined in. "We're done with your rules. You don't scare us anymore. Your time is up." Karen's face twisted, red and trembling. For a second I thought she might lunge at me. Instead she pointed a finger and hissed, "This isn't over." But deep down, I think everyone knew it was. That night I tucked the letter into the binder and sat by the river with my kids. My daughter leaned against me, whispering, "Daddy, does this mean she can't yell at us anymore?" I kissed her forehead. "Not for much longer, sweetheart. Still, I knew better than to underestimate Karen. She wouldn't go quietly. She'd try one last desperate move, and sure enough she did, because the next week she tried to use the very park she once policed as her battleground, and that's where her empire finally collapsed. If you were in our neighborhood, would you have joined the Riverside gathering or kept your head down until the state's final ruling? Do you think Karen truly believed she was protecting property values, or was it always just about control? CTA. If that preliminary state ruling gave you chills of satisfaction, smash that like button right now. And subscribe, because the next, Karen makes her final desperate play in the neighborhood park, and it ends in poetic justice you won't want to miss. The park was supposed to be a place of peace. A place where families gathered for barbecues, kids chased each other through the grass, and neighbors waved over picnic tables. For decades, it had been the beating heart of our community. But thanks to Karen, it was about to become the site of her final unraveling. It started innocently enough. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood had organized a potluck. Nothing formal, just families bringing casseroles, coolers of soda, and fold-out chairs. I brought my famous chili, and Mark showed up with his smoked brisket. Everyone seemed lighter, freer, like the dark cloud of the HOA's tyranny had finally begun to lift. But of course, Karen couldn't stand seeing us happy. Halfway through the afternoon, as kids were playing tag and music floated through the air from someone's speaker, Karen marched into the park like a general onto a battlefield, clipboard in hand, sunglasses, perched high, lips pursed tighter than I'd ever seen. She didn't say hello. She didn't acknowledge the kids running around her. She went straight to the center of the picnic tables and bellowed, "This gathering is unauthorized." The chatter died instantly. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the children stopped playing. Karen had that effect. Her voice could cut through joy like a knife. "This park," she continued, waving her clipboard like a weapon, "is HOA property. Any event must be approved in advance with appropriate fees paid. None of you filed the paperwork. Therefore, you are trespassing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people looked stunned, others angry. Me? I was prepared. I stood up slowly, binder under my arm. "Karen," I said, my voice steady, "you no longer have the authority to make those demands." Her face reddened instantly. "Excuse me? I am the HOA president and I will not—" But before she could finish, I pulled a folded paper from my binder and held it up high. "As of last week, the State Oversight Committee has required corrective action from the HOA. That means no fines, no harassment, and no enforcement until the investigation is complete. You know this. You were copied on the letter." A murmur spread through the crowd. Heads turned toward Karen, eyes narrowing. For months, they'd lived in fear of her rules. Now, in broad daylight, they saw proof of her power crumbling. But Karen wasn't about to back down. "This is lies," she shrieked. "Fake documents. He's deceiving you all. This gathering is illegal." She slammed her clipboard onto the picnic table, rattling plates and spilling someone's coleslaw. That was the moment Mark had enough. He stood, broad shoulders squared, and said, "Karen, you're embarrassing yourself. Nobody here is afraid of you anymore." Applause broke out. Actual applause. Neighbors clapped, cheered, some even stood up beside Mark. The tide had turned. Karen's face twisted with rage. She pointed at me, spitting words like venom. You're behind this. You've poisoned them against me. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." I met her glare calmly. I think we all do now. She was trembling, shaking with fury. And then she did something none of us expected. She called the police. Right there, in the middle of the park, she pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and declared in a shrill voice, "There's an unlawful gathering happening. They're trespassing on private property. Send officers immediately." The silence afterward was deafening. People exchanged looks of disbelief. Someone muttered, "Is she serious?" She was. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up. Lights flashing, kids clung to their parents. Adults stiffened nervously. Karen strutted forward to meet the officers, waving her clipboard like a golden ticket. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed dramatically. "These people are violating HOA rules and trespassing on our park. I demand you remove them immediately." The officers glanced at each other, unimpressed. One of them, a tall man with greying hair, turned to me. "Sir, what's going on here?" I handed him the state letter. "Officer, this is an HOA dispute currently under state investigation. The board has been ordered to suspend enforcement until further notice. This gathering is just neighbors sharing food. Nothing illegal here." The officer read the letter carefully, his brow furrowed, then smoothed into something almost like a smirk. He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, this doesn't appear to be a police matter." Karen's jaw dropped. "What? Of course it is. They're trespassing." The officer shook his head. "This is a civil dispute, not criminal. Unless you have evidence of an actual crime, there's nothing for us to do here." The second officer added gently, "Ma'am, you might want to take a step back. You're escalating a situation that doesn't need police involvement." The crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in laughter, actual laughter, bubbling and uncontrollable. Neighbors who had once whispered in fear were now chuckling, shaking their heads, some even clapping the officers on the back in relief. Karen's face turned crimson. She sputtered, stomped, tried to argue, but the officers weren't having it. Finally, in utter defeat, she grabbed her clipboard, muttered something about lawsuits, and stormed out of the park. The kids resumed their games. Music played again. Someone handed the officers a plate of brisket, which they politely declined with a smile, and just like that, the park was ours again. Later that night, as I tucked my kids into bed, my daughter asked, "Daddy, does this mean it's finally over?" I hesitated. Karen was humiliated, sure. Her power was collapsing, but I knew people like her. They didn't give up easily. "Almost, sweetheart," I whispered. Almost. Because what I didn't realize then was that Karen's humiliation in the park wasn't the end. It was the spark. The moment the state decided enough was enough. And soon the final ruling would come down, and Karen's reign of terror would shatter once and for all. If you were in that park, would you have laughed when the police dismissed Karen, or stayed silent out of fear she might come after you later? Do you think Karen honestly believed calling the police would save her, or was it just one more desperate grab for control? CTA. If you loved seeing Karen's police stunt backfire in front of the whole neighborhood, hit that like button right now. And make sure to subscribe, because the next chapter brings the final state ruling and the ultimate downfall of Karen's HOA empire. The week after Karen's public meltdown in the park felt strangely quiet. For the first time in months, there were no threatening letters in our mailboxes, no sudden fines, no early morning compliance checks with her clipboard. It was like the entire HOA had frozen in place. But in that silence we all felt it. Something big was coming. And then, one crisp Wednesday morning, it happened. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard the familiar sound of Mark's boots on the driveway. He didn't bother knocking, just waved an envelope in the air like he was holding a winning lottery ticket. "It came!" he shouted, practically bouncing with excitement. "The ruling from the state! They finally sent it!" My heart jumped. I snatched the envelope, my hands trembling as I tore it open. The letter inside bore the seal of the state's Housing and Community Oversight Division, official final binding. I started reading aloud, neighbors gathering as words spread like wildfire. After thorough investigation of complaints regarding the Greenfield Oaks Homeowners Association, including allegations of misuse of fines, harassment of residents, and failure to comply with state HOA law, I paused, my voice shaking. Eyes were glued to me. Even kids stopped playing to listen. The Oversight Committee finds the Greenfield Oaks HOA, under the leadership of President Karen Whitmore, in violation of state statutes regarding fair governance and misuse of collected funds. Gasps broke out. A few muttered, "I knew it." I continued, "The HOA's authority to levy fines and enforce non-essential rules is hereby suspended indefinitely. An interim administrator appointed by the state will assume oversight of operations until a new board can be elected." That was it. The words we'd all been waiting for. Karen's reign was officially over. Cheers erupted. Mark threw his hat in the air like he was at a rodeo. Neighbors hugged, clapped, even cried. For months, we'd been crushed under Karen's petty dictatorship, and in one stroke it was gone. But the real gut punch for Karen was still buried in the letter's final paragraph. I read it slowly, savoring every word. Additionally, due to evidence of financial misconduct, President Whitmore is referred to the state attorney's office for further review. The crowd went silent for a beat. Then the cheers grew louder than ever. Not only had she lost her power, she was under investigation. That afternoon, we didn't just celebrate, we planned. We gathered in the community center. Ironically, the same place Karen used to lecture us about violations. The mood was electric. People who'd been silent for months suddenly had voices again. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been fined 3 times for hanging her grandkids' bikes on her porch, stood tall and said, "We need a board that works for us, not against us." Mark suggested term limits. Another neighbor proposed a community garden in the empty lot Karen once wanted to pave into a decorative stone feature. For the first time, the HOA felt like our association. But as we brainstormed, the door burst open. Karen. She looked nothing like the iron-fisted woman we'd seen at the park. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red like she hadn't slept, and her clipboard, her precious symbol of power, was missing. "You can't do this," she shrieked, voice cracking. "This is my community. I built this place. You think some letter can stop me?" The room froze. Nobody moved. Then Mrs. Rodriguez stood, her voice calm but firm. "Karen, you hurt this community. You fined us, threatened us, treated us like criminals in our own homes. It's over. The state said so." Karen's lip trembled. For a second, I thought she might cry, but instead, she pointed at me with a shaking finger. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You poisoned them against me. You'll regret this." Before I could reply, the interim administrator, a tall, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Lang, stepped forward. She had arrived quietly, observing the meeting from the back. Now she held up her ID badge and spoke with an authority Karen couldn't match. "Ms. Whitmore, your authority as HOA president has been revoked. Effective immediately, you are prohibited from representing this association in any capacity. Failure to comply could result in legal consequences." The room buzzed with shock. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked around, desperate for support, but all she saw were the very neighbors she'd alienated. Not one of them spoke for her. Finally, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, Karen had no audience, no power, no control. Over the next few days, the neighborhood transformed. No more violation notices taped to doors. No more anonymous threats about lawn length. People started repainting their houses in colors they loved. Kids set up lemonade stands without fear of being fined for unsanctioned commerce. The laughter that had vanished for so long slowly returned. But for me, the most powerful moment came a week later. I was walking past the park when I saw Karen sitting alone on a bench. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no entourage. Just Karen, she looked small, deflated. For a moment, I felt almost sorry for her. Power had consumed her so fully that when it was stripped away, she had nothing left. She glanced up, eyes meeting mine. For the first time in all these months, there was no hostility, just exhaustion. "You think you've won," she whispered. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about me winning. It was about the neighborhood reclaiming its soul. And though Karen was gone from power, part of me suspected she wasn't done yet. People like her never let go completely. But the difference now, she no longer had the HOA to back her up, and the next time she tried to strike, she'd be standing alone. Do you think Karen truly believed she was helping the neighborhood, or was it always about control and ego? If you had been in that community center when Karen barged in, would you have stayed silent or stood up like Mrs. Rodriguez to tell her it was over? CTA. Karen's downfall was satisfying, but the story isn't over. If you want to see how neighbors rebuild after tyranny and whether Karen tries one last desperate move, make sure to smash that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Your thoughts fuel the next chapter of this wild ride. For weeks after the state's ruling, peace blanketed Greenfield Oaks like a long-awaited spring. The lawns that once felt like battlefields now blossomed with personality. Mr. Patel painted his shutters a bold teal, much to the delight of his wife. Kids played tag in the park until the sun dipped low, their laughter ringing through the neighborhood like music. Even the Rodriguez family strung lights across their porch, something Karen had fined them for twice before. For the first time in months, the neighborhood wasn't afraid of its own reflection, but peace never lasts when someone like Karen is around. One Thursday evening, just as the sun bled orange across the rooftops, I received a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't on HOA stationery. Those days were gone, but I recognized the sharp, angry handwriting immediately. To the residents of Greenfield Oaks, do not be fooled. The state's decision was temporary. I'm still your rightful HOA president. You will soon see that those who betrayed me will regret it. Consider this your final warning. Signed, Karen. I laughed out loud at first. After everything, the investigation, the suspension, the humiliation, she was still clinging to her crumbling throne. But as I read the letter again, the smile faded. Karen wasn't just sulking. She was threatening, and I wasn't the only one who got it. By morning, nearly every neighbor had pulled the same letter from their mailbox. "She's unhinged," Mark muttered as we gathered on my porch, the letters spread out like evidence. "She can't accept reality. But what does she mean by final? Warning? That question answered itself 2 days later. It was Saturday morning. Families were out mowing lawns, kids chalking sidewalks, when the rumble of a moving truck echoed down our street. Everyone paused to look. And then we saw her, Karen. Not moving out. Oh no. She was moving her sister in. A woman just as stern-faced, dragging boxes labeled legal files and documents. Neighbors exchanged wary glances. Karen wasn't just licking her wounds. She was regrouping. Sure enough, within a week, notices appeared on doors. Not official HOA letters, but bold flyers stamped with Karen's new creation. Greenfield Oaks Preservation Society. In big block letters, the flyers read, "Join the Preservation Society. Protect our community standards before it's too late. Mandatory membership coming soon." It was laughable, really. A fake HOA. No legal standing. But the brazenness of it unsettled people. She was trying to build a shadow government, one not bound by state oversight. "She's lost her mind," Mrs. Rodriguez said at our next gathering. "But if even a few neighbors sign up, she'll start her little army again." We couldn't let that happen. The interim administrator, Ms. Lang, acted quickly. She called a special meeting at the community center. This time, though, the room wasn't tense with fear. It buzzed with unity. People were fed up. When Karen arrived, yes, she showed up uninvited. She strode in like she still owned the place. Her sister trailed behind, arms full of binders. Karen slammed one onto the table. "This neighborhood is falling apart without me," she declared. "Look at the garish shutters, the tacky lights, the weeds growing in plain sight. You need me back before Greenfield Oaks becomes a dump." Her words, meant to intimidate, instead drew chuckles. Mark stood, crossing his arms. "Karen, we're thriving without you. Families are happy. Kids are playing. Nobody's afraid anymore. The only thing dragging this place down is you." Karen's face flushed crimson. She turned to the crowd, her voice desperate now. "Don't. You see, standards are everything. Without rules, this place will rot. If you don't bring me back, the property values will plummet. You'll lose everything." But something had shifted. Months ago, her scare tactics might have worked. Now, they only revealed how powerless she'd become. Then Ms. Lang, calm as ever, pulled out her own stack of papers. "Ms. Whitmore," she said firmly, "this is a formal cease and desist order. You are to stop distributing fraudulent documents and misrepresenting yourself as having authority in this community. Continued behavior will result in legal action." Karen's eyes widened. "Legal action? Against me? I'm this neighborhood." "No," Ms. Lang replied, her voice like steel. "You were, and you abused it. Now you're just another resident, nothing more." The room erupted in applause. Neighbors rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. Some shouted, "It's over, Karen!" Others simply shook their heads. Done with her antics once and for all. Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't process what was happening. Her sister tugged her sleeve, whispering, but Karen yanked free, her voice breaking as she screamed, "You'll regret this, all of you!" And then she fled. Binder clutched to her chest, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. For a long moment, we all stood in stunned silence. Then slowly laughter filled the room, because deep down we knew that was Karen's last gasp. In the weeks that followed, her preservation society fizzled. Nobody signed up. The flyers disappeared. Even her sister stopped appearing in public. Karen remained in her house, blinds drawn, rarely seen. The woman who once controlled everything now controlled nothing, not even her own reputation, and the neighborhood. It flourished. Barbecues replaced HOA hearings. Block parties filled the park instead of compliance checks. For the first time, Greenfield Oaks wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a community. Still, late at night, I sometimes wondered what Karen thought as she sat in her darkened house, watching from behind the blinds. Did she regret it? Or did she still dream of making a comeback, some new scheme to seize control again? Because if there's one thing I've learned about people like Karen, it's this: even when you take away their power, they never truly stop scheming. The only question was, what would she try next? Do you think Karen truly believed her preservation society would succeed, or was it just her pride refusing to let go? If you were one of Karen's neighbors, would you have ignored her flyers or confronted her directly about her desperate attempt? CTA. Karen's empire is crumbling. But is she really finished? Don't miss the final chapter. Hit subscribe. Share this story and tell me in the comments, if you were in our shoes, how would you deal with someone like Karen once and for all? After Karen's Preservation Society collapsed, the neighborhood finally began to breathe again. You could almost feel the tension draining from the sidewalks. People stopped whispering when they passed her house. Kids ran past her lawn, without fear. But Karen wasn't done. I should have known. People like her don't fade quietly. They cling to control until their nails bleed. It was a crisp autumn morning when the storm hit. I woke to the sound of trucks rumbling down the street. Not delivery vans, not movers, but something heavier. When I stepped outside, still in my robe, I froze. Karen stood in her yard, directing contractors, men with clipboards, ladders and measuring wheels. She waved her arms like a general on the battlefield. "They'll regret underestimating me." She barked loud enough for the whole block to hear. "By the time I'm done, every violation will be documented. Every property will be assessed. This community will bow to me again." The workers were stringing caution tape, hammering stakes, even measuring people's fences. My stomach dropped. "Karen!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" She spun toward me, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "I'm reinstating the HOA standards. Since none of you are capable of order, I've hired professionals to conduct a compliance audit. You'll all be receiving fines shortly." I laughed, though my chest burned with anger. "You don't have an HOA anymore. You don't have that. Authority," her smirk widened. "Authority is taken, not given, and I'm taking it back." Neighbors began spilling onto their porches, muttering in disbelief. The contractors, confused but obedient, kept working. That's when Ms. Lang arrived. She must have gotten word already. She pulled up in her sedan, heels clicking as she strode across the pavement like a storm in human form. "Ms. Whitmore," she called, her voice sharp, "you are in direct violation of the state's order. These men have no legal right to enforce anything here." Karen sneered. "I hired them personally, and as a property owner, I have the right to protect my investment. If the rest of you won't uphold standards, I will." Ms. Lang didn't flinch. She pulled a folded document from her bag. "This is a restraining order. Effective immediately, you are prohibited from impersonating HOA authority, distributing fraudulent notices, or harassing residents. If you continue, you will face criminal charges." For the first time, Karen faltered. Her smirk twitched. You can't do that." But Ms. Lang's voice carried like a judge's gavel. "I already did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones were out, recording every second. Karen's face contorted, rage twisting her features. "You're all traitors," she screamed. "Ungrateful, selfish traitors. I built this neighborhood, and you're tearing it apart. When property values plummet, don't come crying to me." The contractors, realizing the mess they'd walked into, began quietly packing up. Without her money, without legal standing, they had no reason to stay. Karen lunged at one, trying to stop him from leaving. "No, you can't quit. I hired you. This is my neighborhood." The poor man shook her off gently. "Lady, I don't know what this is, but it's not worth jail time." He loaded his tools and drove off. The others followed. Silence hung heavy, and then, like dominoes, the neighbors turned, not in fear but in fury. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. "Do you have any idea how much you've put us through? How many nights we cried because of your fines? How many families you humiliated?" Mr. Patel joined her. "You stole peace from this neighborhood. And for what? Control, ego. You don't belong here anymore." The crowd murmured, louder and louder, voices uniting in a wave of defiance. Karen spun in circles, cornered by the very people she once controlled. "You'll regret this. Every last one of you will." Her words cut off as flashing lights appeared at the end of the street. A patrol car rolled up, siren wailing once before going silent. 2 officers stepped out, calm but purposeful. "Ms. Whitmore?" one asked. "We've received reports of harassment, impersonation, and violation of a court order. You'll need to come with us." Karen's jaw dropped. "Arrest? You can't arrest me. I'm the president of this community." The officer's reply was steady, almost pitying. "No, ma'am, you're not." The moment her wrists clicked into handcuffs, the neighborhood exhaled. Some neighbors cheered. Others simply hugged each other, relief flooding their faces. As Karen was guided into the patrol car, she twisted her head, eyes burning into me. "This isn't over," she hissed. But for once, I knew it was. The car pulled away, and the street erupted, not in fear, not in whispers, but in celebration. Kids danced on the sidewalks. Someone popped open a cooler and handed out sodas. It felt like the end of a long, brutal war. In the days that followed, news spread quickly. Karen faced charges for harassment, fraud, and contempt of court. Her name, once a weapon, was now a punchline. And Greenfield Oaks, it became what we'd dreamed of all along, a true community, without fear, without fines, without Karen. Looking back now, I realize Karen's reign wasn't just about control. It was about fear. And once we stopped being afraid, she lost everything. The truth is, tyrants only exist when people let them, and together we decided we were done. Do you think Karen truly believed she was protecting the neighborhood, or was it always just about her ego and control? If you were in our community, would you have wanted Karen arrested, or given her one last chance to change? Final CTA. That's the end of Karen's reign. But stories like this are happening in neighborhoods across the country. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, or a neighbor who tried to control everyone? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable HOA tales of justice, revenge, and sweet freedom.